The gate creaked under Marcus Reid's calloused hand, and for a moment, the words that had just been spoken to him refused to make sense, as if the wind rolling down from the Montana hills had scrambled them before they reached his ears. Standing before him, in a maroon dress that looked far too polished for a gravel driveway, was a woman he barely knew, holding a leather briefcase like a shield against her chest, and she had just told him that her father, a man worth more money than Marcus could imagine, wanted him as her husband. Not a business partner. Not an employee. A husband. The absurdity of it should have made him laugh, but something in her eyes, tired and searching, told him this was no joke, and in that instant, Marcus understood that his quiet, broken life was about to be pulled into something far bigger than he ever wanted. If stories about second chances and unexpected kindness move something in you, this is exactly the kind of story we tell here. Hit like, drop a comment about where you're watching from, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Corner so you never miss what happens next. 3 years earlier, Marcus had been a different man entirely, dressed in tailored suits instead of flannel, standing in boardrooms instead of barns. He had built a logistics company from nothing, clawing his way up from a warehouse floor to an executive suite, and for a while, it seemed like everything he touched turned into something solid and lasting. Then his wife passed away suddenly, a blood clot no one saw coming, and the company he loved began to feel like a tomb decorated with awards. He sold his shares within the year, took his daughter Sophie, only 6 years old at the time, and moved to a small ranch outside Bozeman where nobody knew his name or his net worth. He told himself he was protecting her from a world that had already taken her mother. In truth, he was also protecting himself from a version of success that had cost him everything that mattered. Since then, Marcus had built a smaller life, one measured in fence posts repaired, school lunches packed, and quiet evenings reading to Sophie by lamplight. He worked as a hired hand and occasional contractor for the larger properties nearby, his hands roughened by labor that had nothing to do with spreadsheets or shareholder meetings. Few people in town knew that the quiet, broad-shouldered man mending fences had once negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts. He liked it that way. Anonymity felt like a mercy after loss, and Sophie, now 9, had grown up thinking her father had always been exactly what she saw, steady, humble, and endlessly present. That fragile peace shattered the day Diana Harlow arrived at his gate. She was the daughter of Richard Hargrove, an aging industrialist whose company Marcus had once done business with years ago, back when Marcus still wore a different name in different rooms. Diana explained, her voice trembling despite her polished exterior, that her father was dying, his heart failing faster than doctors had predicted, and that his last wish, delivered almost like a fever dream from his hospital bed, was for Diana to marry a man he trusted completely. A man of integrity. A man who had once turned down a deal that would have ruined thousands of employees just to protect his workers, a story Richard had never forgotten. That man, Richard insisted with his failing breath, was Marcus Reid. Marcus felt his chest tighten as old memories surfaced, memories of boardroom battles and impossible choices, memories he had buried under years of hay bales and homework help. He told Diana plainly that he was no longer that man, that he had left that world behind for good reason, and that marriage wasn't something arranged like a business merger, especially not to a stranger following her father's dying wish. Diana's eyes glistened, not with manipulation, but with genuine desperation, and she admitted that she wasn't asking for love, only for enough performance of stability to grant her father peace in his final days, a peace he desperately needed after decades of guilt over choices he'd made in business and in fatherhood. For days after that encounter, Marcus wrestled with something deeper than the strange proposal itself. He wrestled with the ghost of who he used to be, the ambitious man who once believed success meant sacrificing everything soft and human. He watched Sophie doing homework at the kitchen table, her small fingers gripping a pencil too tightly, and he wondered what kind of example he would set if he let a stranger's desperation pull him back into a world he had sworn off. But he also remembered his late wife's voice, gentle and firm, reminding him that kindness sometimes demanded discomfort, that doing the right thing rarely arrived wrapped in convenience. Marcus visited Richard Hargrove at the hospital, driven more by curiosity and unresolved respect than any intention to agree to marriage. The old man, frail against white sheets, gripped Marcus's hand with surprising strength and confessed that guilt had eaten him alive for years, guilt over choosing profit over people, guilt over a daughter he had raised to inherit an empire but never taught to feel safe outside of it. Richard admitted he didn't actually expect Marcus to marry Diana. What he desperately wanted was for someone honorable to simply be present in her life, to show her that decency in business and life were not mutually exclusive, something Richard himself had failed to demonstrate. The marriage request, Richard confessed through tears, was his flawed, desperate attempt to force that lesson into existence before he ran out of time. Something shifted in Marcus that day. He realized this wasn't about romance or arrangement at all, but about two broken families circling the same wound of loss and fear, searching for someone steady to hold on to. He returned to Diana, not with an acceptance of marriage, but with an offer of friendship and mentorship instead, promising to help her navigate the company her father would leave behind, to teach her the lessons about balancing humanity and business that he himself had learned through devastating loss. Diana broke down in relief rather than disappointment, admitting she had been terrified of a loveless marriage just as much as she feared disappointing her dying father. Over the following weeks, an unlikely bond formed. Diana visited the ranch often, initially for business advice, but gradually drawn by the simple warmth of Marcus's home, the sound of Sophie's laughter, and the sight of a man who had every reason to be bitter choosing gentleness instead. Sophie adored her almost instantly, following her around asking questions about her fancy car and briefcase, while Diana found herself teaching Sophie small things her own privileged childhood had denied her, like how to skip stones properly or bake cookies without a housekeeper's help. Marcus watched this unfold with quiet astonishment, realizing that healing rarely arrives in the form we expect, often disguised instead as inconvenient, uninvited chaos. Richard Hargrove passed away peacefully 2 months later, holding Diana's hand, finally at ease knowing his daughter had found not a husband, but something arguably rarer, genuine mentorship and unconditional care from a man who asked for nothing in return. At the funeral, Diana stood beside Marcus and Sophie, no longer a stranger but something closer to family, and she whispered to Marcus that his refusal to simply comply with her father's request had ultimately given Richard something far more valuable than obedience ever could, real peace born from real integrity. If this story touched something inside you, if it reminded you that saying no to the wrong thing can sometimes be the greatest gift you give someone, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Your support means everything to this channel and helps these stories reach more hearts that need them. Before we close this chapter, I want to ask something special from you. If you believe true strength sometimes looks like gentle refusal, type the words, "quiet strength," in the comments below, so we know this story reached exactly who it needed to. Marcus never became a CEO's husband, and he never returned to boardrooms or business suits. Instead, he remained exactly what he had chosen to be years earlier, a humble single father on a quiet ranch, now with an extended, unconventional family who understood that the truest inheritance isn't wealth or title, but the courage to remain kind even when the world offers you an easier, emptier path.